I guess I should go put on that striped shirt I have in the picture.
You've got stripes now. That's okay.
Oh yeah, I've got these green ones. Okay.
Did you start streaming yet? How come it's playing back? Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations with Kate. I'm so glad that you're here tonight and joining us, and I'm very excited to have a wonderful person with us tonight. I hope that it's okay for me to say, I feel like she's a very good friend and certainly somebody that I admire with all my might. This is Margaret Ecker. Hello, Margaret.
Good evening, Kate. And yes, let's call it a friendship.
I think we should. If hours spent together talking and scheming build a friendship, then ours should be a tall tower, right? I'm so glad that you're here tonight. The reason that we're so excited to hear from you is because of all your work as a leader of the soup kitchen here at St. James. But before we get into all of that and the questions that I have for you about our unhoused friends and their lives and challenges and your hopes for the future, first I want to just find out from you how you originally found your way to St. James.
Well, I was prepared for your asking that because I've treated myself to the Kate Show over the last few weeks. And I know it's one of the hallmarks of how you're approaching this is this really lovely way of getting to know people who even you thought you knew, and then there's these new things that come out. So, yeah, I I came to St. James about 100 years ago in
Mhm.
the late 90s. I was working as a nurse, which is what I did for my living, and I had some good friends who had just joined the choir here,
Mhm.
and they encouraged me to think about doing that. And it was right around the time that the new organ was opening up.
Mhm.
Um, I was working at Children's Hospital, and not to bring up a terribly tragic event, but the man who was killed when he was killed, the original organist, we actually got a notice as nurses in the hospital because it was a security alert. And it's what made me ever first know about St. James was
Really?
hearing as a nurse, be on the alert, this has happened, it's just a few blocks from the hospital. So when the organ was celebrated, I came to the service. Then I had friends in the choir who encouraged me. And then Princess Diana was killed, and I came to that service, the memorial service, which was
You.
packed with celebrities and commoners and all kinds of people. But the
Commoners.
gloriousness of the choir was overwhelming, and so I was really honored to have passed the tryout with Jim.
So did you sing at Princess Diana's?
No, I was inspired to wanna join the choir by
Oh, got it.
hearing that, yeah.
That's wonderful. Wow. So what was it like being in the choir?
You know, it was, above and beyond my wildest expectations. I remember one of my first big feelings when I walked into the choir. I was at that moment, a relatively new nurse manager. I had risen up through the ranks sort of without really intending to, so I didn't
Mhm.
really know what I was doing.
Mhm.
But I was in charge of a lot of things and had new accountabilities, and I took them very seriously, and they kept me up at night. But I remember walking into the choir room and knowing right away, I'm putting my faith in Jim Bonamonti. And I yielded everything. Like, I didn't have to run a darn thing in there, and beauty would happen. So that's how I remember
It sounds very therapeutic,
it.
but not easy. I'm sure it was lots of hard work.
It was super, it was a very big stretch for me. I pretty much faked my way, into it. There were even then wonderful, accomplished singers in the choir, and even the amateur people were, I felt more accomplished than I. So I worked hard to stay, up with it. I got my piano tuned and worked hard in the
Mhm.
background to be able to meet the high gold standard that was there at the choir.
I bet. So, um, so, oh, by the way, I wonder, do you know a beautiful parishioner of ours named Comfort Ogbunamiri? I don't know if you've ever met her or not.
I have met her once or twice. Tell me.
I think her career is as a dietitian.
Oh, yeah.
Um, yes, but she's one of the mothers of our church, and I noticed she's in the chat. So
Okay.
I'm sure we'll be hearing from her in a few minutes. Um, so that was your introduction to St. James. And how did you end up doing what you're doing now? And tell us, what are you doing now?
So now now I'm retired from nursing, and I don't sing in the choir. I haven't sung in the choir for a good while. But I now sign my emails as lead volunteer of Soup Kitchen and Shower Project at St. James Episcopal Church.
Okay, so that's your new responsibility. But wait, before we leave nursing, I guess I do want to ask you a kind of a question about it. Um, what did nursing mean to you? What was the driving force of that work for you?
So it's a great question. I don't often get asked it, but I went to college first and didn't think about that. It was the 60s when I was in college, and I was active in um, protests and civil rights issues. I was educated in the South, and just a couple of miles from where Martin Luther King was murdered, and those those events were occupying my attention, and I had thought that I should go to law school because law school, the law was what we were hanging our hats on as the way to fix what was wrong. But the first summer out of college, I worked with an amazing group of other students, medical students, nursing students, undergraduate students, engineering students, to do community organizing up in East Tennessee in rural community, little coal mining towns. We sort of invented it on the fly, and it went on to have a very long life. A lot of the work we did actually is still extant in the rural parts of Tennessee. But that two things happened. Because I was a woman and I was in the South, there was a fair amount of discouragement about going to law school. Hillary Clinton didn't listen to that discouragement, but I did. And I took it to heart. And it was like, do I have the stamina to fight those fights for the next few years? So that was one thing that happened. But the other thing that happened was that doing that work sort of helped me to see, or allowed me to see, that having good health was really the bottom line. Like if poor people didn't have health, they weren't going to be able to be empowered. And so to be part of making that possible, of giving access to people, giving access to healthcare to people, took on a new mission or a new meaning for me. And so
it became a justice pursuit.
It became another way to pursue justice.
Yes.
Than the law.
So you could pursue it through the law. You could pursue it through quality health care.
That's right. Exactly.
And it's interesting that the heartbeat of your work in the health field was justice, which is interesting as we now sort of move these years forward into your work with the soup kitchen and the shower program and what you're doing there. But before I sort of delve into what all that means to you, can you just sketch what those programs are for whoever the 2 or 3 people are who haven't heard us all talk about it?
Absolutely. So I can't talk about food without talking about Food Pantry, which of course is run by Kathy Helm and has been for a good while. And that's on Thursdays. So I'm going to describe the 3 or 4 days a week when things are happening.
Yeah, please do.
So Thursday mornings is Food Pantry, and Food Pantry gives out, I believe, maybe 150 meals, about 2/3 of them to people who are low income housed in the neighborhood. So they're bags of food that need a kitchen to be prepared. But a good third of them are prepared for regular people who are living on the street. So that's one chapter in the
right.
Your
I've
book.
heard those are called go bags.
The go bags, yes, for people who are living on the street. That's right. Yeah. So that's Thursday, and she's got a wonderful, we can talk about all the changes, but that's Thursday. Friday is Soup Kitchen, and that's been a tradition for way before my time, 25 years. The Soup Kitchen's been going on, always on Fridays. I mean, I hear the stories of how it was in the beginning and how it, changed over time and became what it is. But it's a very robust meal, and I don't think that's what happens all the time at Soup Kitchen. Soup kitchens do a good job when they give out a sandwich and a piece of fruit and a bag of chips. That's not what we do. We do this.
What do you do, Margaret? What's on the menu?
We do this fully imagined and prepared hot meal. So it has a pasta dish with meat and vegetables, hot soup, which is also full of vegetables, often sides of vegetables, depending on what's been donated during the week. We have a lot of bakeries who donate to us on Thursdays and Fridays, and we put that out for people. We make 150 or 200 sandwiches of tuna fish, very popular, peanut butter and jelly, very popular, and beverages. So before the pandemic happened and we had to change things, that was our full menu. We have not modified it very much, despite the pandemic.
I know. That's amazing. Nowadays, everyone, they get all of that into a bag.
That's right. That's right, because of the wonderful imagination of the people who are still hard at it. And then on Saturday mornings, a relatively new program that's very exciting and super successful in terms of numbers is St. James Partners with an outfit called Showers of Hope. And that provides, it's a van that gets pulled into the parking lot. And it's a very elegant outfit. It gets hooked up to a electricity and the garden hose. And just with that, they're able to provide 4 hot showers every 20 minutes. So we are giving showers to maybe 40 people now on Saturday mornings. And we do it out of the parking lot. And so we're able to feed and give clean clothes as well.
Wow. So breakfast food or maybe leftover.
That's right. From
the
Saturday
night
and Friday.
before.
And then we have one more little tiny, I don't mean it to minimize it. It's a wonderful contribution, but it's brand new.
New kid on the block, right?
And it's happening on Tuesdays.
Mm-hmm.
And that is Tuesdays midday from about 12 to 3. A team of young people come in and make sandwiches and do put together a much more modest meal, but they make about 100 of them. They give out, depends on the day, maybe 10, 20, 25 of them from the back door of the church. But then whatever's left, they divide into 2 teams, put it in their cars, and they go out into the community of the church and give it to people who didn't come in, but who are living in the neighborhood of the church.
That's wonderful. And what do we call that Tuesday program?
Well, I call it Tuesday Soup Kitchen.
Mm-hmm. That's good. That's good. I like it. That's amazing. So all of this has been going on, but we're in the midst of a pandemic. So it's probably, the way that you do it has probably changed. How has it changed? Well, I know that Friday nights, pre-pandemic, were a scene famous for their ambiance. Classical musicians would come in and play, and the meals would just be these gorgeous feasts served on china, not your average soup kitchen.
That's exactly right. And we had come to precede Soup Kitchen with a thing that had been super successful, which was what we called happy hour or social hour, where we invited people in an hour or 2 before we actually began to serve to just hang out in the courtyard. Mm. And that became so satisfying to be a part of, to see people respect it, embrace it, and find a safe place off the street where they could hang out and be with each other while they, waited for supper to start. So it was a full package deal, and all that changed overnight.
But before we talk about the change, don't forget the music. You always would provide these playlists. How did you decide what to play? Because the music was always amazing.
Well, sometimes, I don't know, whatever. I found that playing Bach preludes and fugues was very calming and very backgroundy for what was going on. But then sometimes it was pretty exciting. Like Aretha Franklin has this really amazing album of gospel tunes that recently got released in the last couple of years. When I reheard the story of Nat King Cole and his relationship to St. James, I made a whole playlist of Nat King Cole songs, and that was very exciting for people to hear. And then they'd say, "Who is this? This sounds so familiar." And then we would have a chance to talk about the whole Nat King Cole thing. Most people,
we're missing out. I think we need to post these happy hour playlists. Because I'm up in my office, writing a sermon, and I can just hear the music and the laughter, and I can see the twinkle lights down there, and it's always just such a beautiful scene,
Yes, it was that, definitely that.
And now things have changed for now. And what do they look like now?
So there's several, I think, major points to talk about. The first thing that had to happen is that I'm sure everybody who's listening knows that one of the categories of people who are most vulnerable are older people. And 2/3 of the regular volunteers who came to Soup Kitchen were older. And we needed to step
Really, that many? 2/3, would you say, are over 60?
65, yeah, over 65. And so the first thing we had to do was stand down. And the second thing we had to do was, nobody ever even once said, let's compromise on the meal. It was like, how can we keep the meal being so amazing? So for Fridays, we we came up with this idea that what we had done before was everybody would show up on Fridays and we'd have like seriously organized chaos for like 2 or 3 or 4 hours while
This
we
is the
cooked.
volunteers.
Yes. And before even people from the street would show up, we were there from 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon trying to put it all together. But it was, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 people in the kitchen. We couldn't do that anymore, even if we'd had younger volunteers. So we had a conversation and dreamed up this new system just on the spot. And it's what we've stuck with ever since. And it is that Tuesdays, Wednesdays
Yeah.
or Thursdays, 2, maximum 3 people show up and make pasta on Wednesdays, let's say.
Yeah.
And they're masked and they keep 6 feet distance and they wash their hands and they glove. It's all super safe practices, but and the only way we could do that was to minimize people in the kitchen. So we've had to turn volunteers away who are used to the old way of just showing up. We're very strict about it. So one day is for soup, one day is for pasta. Friday late morning is sandwich making, and then Friday around 3 begins the packaging of everything. So the soup and the pasta get reheated, put into to-go containers. That's put into a white bag with whatever else we have, sometimes messages, sometimes fruit, sometimes it's whatever we have, beverages. All that now goes on a table out in the courtyard, and people simply come up. I'm only telling you what I've heard. I don't do that as part of Soup Kitchen anymore. And the pictures that I've seen.
We've seen pictures. Yeah. Oh, I should say that there are also, you mentioned donated baked goods. I know our friends at Cake House.
Yes.
Are always giving us amazing pastries. And one more, I wanted to, before we completely move beyond the old way, I have to give a shout out to Chapel.
Oh my goodness. Thank you. Please.
That's such a beautiful part of the old way that we did the Friday night Soup Kitchen was Sarah Jane and Father John would lead chapel in the chapel. And it was beautiful.
Yeah, and sometimes when Sarah Jane needed to have a vacation or was out of town, Elizabeth Harris, who is the immediate past lead volunteer for all of Soup Kitchen, would step up to the plate. And we had this, I don't know who gave us this. I know, I think Hannah, Kazue's daughter, brought it back from Japan. Anyway, this cowbell. And we would do the cowbell, and that would be the sign. And everybody who wanted to go to chapel then could move into the chapel. And Sarah Jane or Elizabeth or Father John would lead a service there. Yeah.
Beautiful services. So just the way that I miss regular church on Sunday mornings, I know that we are missing the Friday night church, and the church that is Alcoholics Anonymous, and the church that is Narcotics, and all the churches that happen at St. James. But back to what goes into those bags, loads of good stuff, hot. People just grab and go nowadays, though, right?
And what's amazing, my last job was as the director of nursing quality at Kaiser. So I was used to thinking in numbers and measurings and how, outcome measures. And so it's with great pride and happiness that I can report that the numbers of people who come have not budged. So if anything, we're seeing more people, but certainly the same 60, 70, 80 people who always came, they still come. I think the biggest hardship that happens when they come is that they congregate on the sidewalks, and we know that's not really safe for them, but they come because of the legacy that Soup Kitchen built and that they miss, just like you were saying. It's the thing that they miss, like people are missing all sorts of routines and lovelinesses that we used to have.
I know. I was having an outdoor, socially distanced, masked meeting with our junior warden, Jack Pitts, yesterday. We were just looking at some things to do with the physical plant of the building. And he said, it's just so great to see another human being. It's I think we're all running on such a deficit in that way. Yes. It's just almost indescribable. And yet, I've heard you talk before about the silver lining. A silver lining in all of this is we have all these new younger volunteers who've stepped up to the plate. And we have this council of experts. Do you want to talk about the Tuesday morning phone call?
I know, let's call it the Council of Elders.
The Council of Elders. That sounds kind of scary.
You should be scared.
I would never mess with the Council of Elders. Anything they say goes.
So, yeah, in order to keep all this going, we had to quickly find younger people to step up, and it happened pretty quickly that a team coalesced around Fridays. It took a little longer for Saturdays, but what's happened with Saturdays now is we have a list of about 60 young people who've expressed interest through a website that we're using. We're about to bring that in-house, but we've been using a wonderful website called LA Works to recruit or make it easy for people we don't even know to sign up. So it's been like a river of new people coming in on Saturdays. And it's been, I mean, it's been tricky to keep them, you know, to orient them. And it's not how I'm used to doing things because I'm so used to being around the same good 12 people every Friday. But I think it's been good for them, and it's been way good, you know, for us to have them.
So then the older crowd who were really doing a lot of the work previously.
Oh my goodness. So, I mean, give me another hour to talk about how we had divided up the labor in the old days, but there were 10, 12 of us maybe who we weren't always all there, but we knew if somebody wasn't going to be there, that somebody else would step up. We had a rotating list of captains who would do the shopping and watch the supply list and make sure we had what we needed. And who the captains would also be responsible for bringing in the new volunteers who might show up and giving them good work to do. But we continue to meet every Tuesday. So every Tuesday at 3 p.m. we have a conference call, and we get John and Bijan and Tony, who are still coming to the projects, to give us what we call the Eyewitness Report. And that's how we start the conversation is, how many people did you see? Did you see Big Mary? What about Mr. Shepherd? Where's Troy? What about Lee? Like, everybody's questions are first and foremost, like, who did you see and how are they doing?
That's hilarious. So these guys know they've got to have been watching carefully because they're going to get grilled, by the Council of Elders.
Right. They have a little notepad so they can have the right answers on Tuesdays. But they've also been wonderful counsel for what's the best way to manage making soup, you know, when you don't have some ingredient, or should we put it in this kind of container or that, or if we refrigerate it, what will it be like in 48 hours? So their expertise has been invaluable for informing in fact, we originally set it up so that we would have one of us was going to be like the pasta captain. So whoever was making pasta could call us for it. We'd be available all day for
a pasta expert.
Yeah.
Speaking of the actual food, just for a minute, Comfort actually had a question, which is, what kinds of donations does the soup kitchen need the most? Money donations, food donations, what's the most helpful?
Well, I think money donations are the easiest because let me answer that in a more complicated way, but come back to the word money, and don't let me not come back. Okay. What's happening right now in Los Angeles with the pandemic, with homelessness, with the incredible instability of restaurants and grocery stores, is that there is a chaos of food supply. Sometimes on some days I must get 5 calls. We have 20 pallets with ground pork and grated cheese. Can you use it? And then somebody will call and say, okay, this restaurant just closed down, but they're doing this and we can deliver sandwiches, 100 sandwiches. Can you use them? So in some ways the chaos is only bigger, and it's wonderful, but we never know what we're going to have. And what's wonderful about what the Council of Elders, as well as about the young people, is the capacity to whatever's there when they show up, they make it into a meal. So
that takes creativity.
Yes, and we haven't talked about Seeds of Hope. Should we talk about that for a second?
That's on hold right now, though, isn't it?
We only just last week did not get a delivery. They said they would go on hold, and then they would call at the last minute. This is what I mean, and say, "Okay, we're bringing 6 crates of onions or mushrooms." Like, we had mushroom soup for like 3 weeks in a row because of all the mushrooms we got at no cost.
Yeah.
So what we do need to purchase are now, that we never had to before in such quantity, are the to-go bags, are the containers, so we used to have it on, like Kate said, like you said, Kate, on platters, on plates that we washed, and so all of that is changed.
Real China.
Yeah, real China. But now it's in cardboard boxes, it's in bags, it's with napkins, it's with water that we used to have pitchers of water. Now we have to have bottled water.
I know.
We used to have juice in a pitcher. Now we give little cartons of orange juice. Those things we have to buy. And that's it's not an overwhelming expense, but it's a new expense.
So that's why you need money.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And then the other thing that's changed, for everybody, is that we're disinfecting before we cook and after we cook. On Saturdays, we put plastic chairs that the school donated or lent to us to use, so people would be able to sit down, but so that they're plastic, so that we can disinfect them after everybody, when one person sits down and then takes a shower and leaves, we disinfect the chair. We have to buy disinfectant in large quantities.
Right.
We have to buy gloves now in large quantities.
Yeah.
So they're new things we're just kind of getting used to.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So that's why it sounds like financial gifts.
They're always welcome.
Always.
But let me say this, that so are canned goods. They're not that good for soup kitchen, but they're great for food pantry. So is pasta. We always are cooking pasta. So we would never turn down anything. We really wouldn't. We'll figure it out. I'm just saying, it's hard to answer that question because, bring it, we'll cook it.
So what, even things like capers and
we'll put that in tuna fish.
I could see Bijan doing something good with capers.
Yeah.
So we've been talking about the sort of the different programs. But I guess I'd like to ask you now what you think this work is all about and what it means to our friends, our unhoused friends who come. I mean, there's a lot of programs all over the city that provide food, that hand out food, and that's great and crucial. Is there something that makes St. James different?
Well, I think that absolutely, in my opinion, I'm prejudiced, but I think St. James, but I think that if you ask any of the new volunteers, they see it too. So I'm not making this up. I think that it has always seemed to me that giving food is the easy thing to say we do. What we've strived to do in the last 4 or 5 years maybe is to try to understand better how can we build on the relationships that we have with people who come to Soup Kitchen and help advocate for them and connect them to the growing numbers of services that are available in the city. If anybody's lived in Los Angeles long enough, you know that we've got Proposition H and HHH, which provided lots of tax dollars to try to solve the problem. And it hasn't gone that well, but there are services. It hasn't gone that well, meaning we have 16% more people on the street than we did a year ago. So,
right.
And that we can talk for a whole nother hour about the background story of why this fire hose of homelessness is happening in the city. It's an important question to grapple with. And ultimately, I feel very strongly that our relationships put us in a place of obligation to try to understand that. where does it come from? But before
First, the
that,
relationship, right?
but first the relationship. I was telling Kate earlier, I've come to, I've been thinking a lot about it recently, and I've come to think of it as a kind of radical knowing. It's a powerful way to be in front of somebody whose life is so different from mine, and yet with whom the connection is very authentic. It's not about pity or or even necessarily charity. It's about knowing and about sitting down and talking with. It's about
Knowing. You mean knowing that individual person and their personality and their life, and is that what you
thank
mean?
you. Exactly that. It's like, who are you and how did you come by here, and making it safe for them to talk about themselves and safe for them to hear about me in small ways. I mean, we're not friends in like you and I are friends in that way. I don't think that's fair to do it, that to call it that. But I think that there is, um, and maybe it's informed by having been a nurse. Maybe it's a little bit easier to fall into that. Like, in order to, there's a thing that happens in being a nurse. Like, you have to be able to, somebody will say, I feel fine, but they don't, because they don't know you and they're not ready to tell you. But as a nurse, I need to know that you don't feel okay. And either I need to see it or I need to measure it, because I need to know, is this medicine working? Is your blood pressure okay? Is your clinical thing, or do we need to get something new going on here and make a change? And so, um, being able to sort of look in that way, look through people's protectiveness, to see them, and and then to make it safe for their vulnerabilities to be right in front of you.
Right.
Anyway, all those things happen, and it makes it a lot more fun to then go out and say to the caseworkers, we have this like super interesting case, and here's what I know about him. Um, uh, and so I think that St. James has become a place because we know people. Increasingly, the caseworkers are coming in. We've invited caseworkers to Soup Kitchen to sit with people. We've taken people out to meet the neighbors who live right around St. James, who we know very well. We've introduced caseworkers to them, and we've actually been privileged to be a part of probably 5 people maybe in the last year or so who got housed. And um, I don't think they would have gotten housed if we didn't know them at St. James.
And just sort of advocated for them.
And advocated for them. Like, here's the story of,
Yeah, let's give an example of this. Are you going to talk about Troy? Or are we going to change names? Sorry.
well, I'm going to talk about him
Okay.
because he's well known by us, and we have a lot of affection for him, but he has, I don't think he has a mental illness, but he has a substance use problem, and his story is super sad. I think in fact, he says that he was an altar boy at St. James. He says that he went to St. James school. He's African American. He's, I don't know, in his 50s maybe, but he has a deep drinking issue, and he has a lot of health issues as a result. He's been on the street for a long time. His mother and then his fiance died on the heels of each other, and it just put him in a tailspin that he could never get out of. And so we've known him for a long time. We've tried very hard, but he got hit by a car, got hospitalized for that, and the caseworker who did the assessment for housing for him gave him a vulnerability score of around 4 or 5 out of 20, which seemed ludicrous. Like, how could that possibly be? He can barely walk. He can't bathe. He doesn't eat well. And so when I went and looked at the scoring thing, he had said nothing about his drinking. He talks frankly about his drinking to Father John, to me, to Tim. I mean, he says, I'm ready to get over this. I just don't know how to do it on my own. So we were able to get caseworkers in and say, this is what we know. This is what he needs. So suddenly, about 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago, not that long ago, we got him in line for this Project Room Key. He got eligible. Then we couldn't find him. So Tim went out on his bike. Kazooie went out on her bike. I was driving around these old neighborhoods. Where's Troy? Where's Troy? Finally, we knew he would be at Soup Kitchen. So Father John texts me at we had until 6 o'clock when they were going to give the room away. So Father John texts me at 4 and says he's here and he wants to go. So I dash over in my car. He's like, kind of like, what? Oh my goodness. We put him in the back of the car. Because that's 6 feet. I drive him over to the Orlando hotel, got him admitted. I had already talked to the person, the lovely woman, Camille, who was running this place. She had already gotten a social worker who knew how complicated his issues were and who was good at those kind of issues, namely sobering up when you've been on the street for a long time. And he spent the first night off the street in decades in a hotel. He's getting fed 3 days a week. He's getting a social worker. He's getting clean clothes. If he has the best chance he's had in a long time to turn his life around. And I don't think that would have happened without Soup Kitchen. And the punchline to the story, I mean, we'll see what happens. That would be the real punchline. But he gets on the bus every day still, I mean, every Friday, and comes over to Soup Kitchen. He gets them. I said when we were at the hotel one time, when I went to visit him, I said, so whose food is better, theirs or ours? And he said, oh yeah, yours, of course. And all the guards start laughing.
But he's coming for that feeling of being known. I mean, deep down, I believe every single human being yearns to be seen and known and loved. That's the whole deal of what we want in life. So Nancy Redford's on the chat. She says, that's profound, Margaret. Lois DeArmond says, so few treat unhoused people as human beings, individuals with the same human needs as all of the rest of us. And she says that you and the St. James crew are heroes. And Comfort is wondering about the pets that our unhoused friends have, and do we ever provide food for the pets?
We have, especially since the pandemic has created all this chaos in the world. Sometimes I actually get a call and say, we have pet food, do you want it? But we've never distributed that from St. James. There's a couple of dogs that come to the showers, but I've never seen pets come to Saturday.
It's an interesting question, though. My vet takes care of a number of dogs that belong to people who are living on the street. So I think there are veterinary services out there too.
Yes.
So we've been talking about relationship, and without naming her name, let's make up the name Susan for our friend who lives across the street from church.
Sure. Okay.
And maybe you could just give us a look into Susan's story. This is somebody who struggles mightily with mental illness. Am I right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Susan is also probably in her middle to late 50s, and she has schizophrenia, florid schizophrenia. And the first time I ever met her, I asked her what her name was, and she said her name was Lee Rodswell. Mm-hmm. She was a Kennedy. And then she said, so what's your name? And I said, my name is Margaret. And she said, Princess Margaret. I knew it. It's been so long. So I say it not exactly to make fun of her, but to say she's a lot of fun to be around.
Yeah.
But she can be very difficult. But at the heart of the matter, she is very responsive to human contact. She does not make it easy. Her disease doesn't make it easy, but she wants it, and it's heartbreaking to see how sick she is.
So what happens? I mean, I'm interested in if you could describe what I think is a kind of a cycle, a really unfortunate cycle that happens for unhoused folks who are really struggling with mental illness. So I think what often starts with some sort of inappropriate behavior that gets the police involved, right?
Oh, I see what you're talking about. Well, yes. I was going to start even a little tiny bit before that.
Okay.
By saying that because I'm so fascinated by Lee, and I didn't know that much about mental illness in my nursing career, I've spent some time in the last year taking some courses and doing some reading and consulting with wonderful psychiatrists that are available in town, and trying to figure out mental illness on the street as well. Um, and so I can say with some accuracy that of people with schizophrenia in the United States, we actually know a lot about how to manage it, much more than we used to know. We understand much more about the physiology of the brain than we did even 10 or 15 years ago. We understand that a combination of medicine and therapy really makes a difference. When I was in school, the whole thing was that it came from your mother. So they called it schizophrenogenic mothers who gave it to their children by how they treated them. We have come so far from that. I mean, it's another planet now. But only about of all schizophrenics in the United States, only about 30% actually get to treatment. So 70% of people with severe mental illness never get access to treatment, either because they're poor or they're misunderstood, or they get in trouble with the law because their behaviors are so difficult, and they end up in jail, and they get a record, and then they become homeless. So I know that advocates of homeless people resist saying that homeless people are mentally ill, and they should. Homelessness comes from a whole host of reasons, but one of the reliable contributors is mental illness that makes holding a job hard, that makes being a part of the social fabric hard. And then once you're out there, getting access to care is impossible. And so
exacerbate.
That's right. And so what can happen is that you can get a 51, you can get the law can be called in and arrest you, and you go to jail. The district attorney is dealing right now, and this election is a lot about how our prisons are so full of mentally ill people, and it's the wrong place for them to be. But even if you get taken into the emergency room for evaluation, it's very, we don't have hospitals anymore to send people to. So people tend to get evaluated, maybe even given some medicine, but they're back on the street again. So there's some innovative projects going on, but it's a real uphill battle. And knowing that makes it a lot easier to be patient with Susan, because she's difficult. She's really hard. She's gotten 2 or 3 offers to come into shelters of high quality with mental health involved. Mental health workers have tried to engage with her, and she has not made it easy. So I'm not flummoxed. Like I don't know what the answer is, but it's a super fascinating question. We have to figure it out. Yeah. And maybe that's another illustration of saying, because we know her and because we see her, we want that. We want to figure it out. And so I don't know if we'll figure it out in my lifetime, but I'm like a dog on a bone on it. Like it's not enough to just feed her. I'm super curious, like what is the right place for her to go? And knowing that I've got that case makes it a lot easier to talk about it when I'm out and about with people who are talking policy, with people who are setting up systems, with people who are setting up clinics, because I know Lee. You mean Lee Radziwill, that is. Lee Radziwill.
Yes, yeah. She's definitely, she's a part of life at St. James.
Right, yes.
As much as you are.
She comes to pantry, she comes to soup kitchen, she comes to showers, and she's feeling so vulnerable, she never takes her clothes off. She showers with all her clothes on, and that's not to launder. It's because she's had something bad going on in her life. I don't know what it is, but she is a St. James family person.
And she moved from down the street to directly across from church. And I think that she did that because it makes her feel better to be able to see this place where she's known and loved.
Exactly.
For who she is. Nancy Redford, Nancy? Have you all met? I don't know if you have or not. Yeah. She says, this is one of the most sophisticated conversations about homelessness's root causes. Will St. James continue to cultivate the relationship with social workers and support systems?
Absolutely. I don't always tell Kate everything I'm thinking, so some of this might be brand new to Kate, but
Is this
I've
your
recently,
dream? Is this your dream for us?
well, it's a new dream. But it seems like the time is right to think about it. And I didn't get the door slammed in my face. And it is, could we figure out a way to actually either have a caseworker that belongs to St. James that we pay because we get grant money to pay for it, or could we have a nurse practitioner join us at showers who could do testing for COVID, who could look at the skin breakdown, not to replace healthcare, but to build the bridge, because most homeless people will not go to the hospital. If they've been in the hospital before, they won't go back. And they're very leery of going to a clinic. But could we bring
We're
it
all
to,
scared of the hospital these days anyway.
exactly, we're all afraid of the hospital, yeah. But could we bring a nurse practitioner to the showers and have her there on Saturday mornings to begin to build that kind of bridge?
Yeah, that's a great idea. I mean, I feel like that's an idea that's been cooking for a while, and it sounds like it might be almost ready.
Well, so I've been talking to the people. I don't want to say because then people are going to know who I'm talking about. But
All right.
there are healthcare providers in the city that are kind of like, that's interesting. So we'll see what happens.
Saturday morning sounds like a great time for that because it's out. There's space for social distancing.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Saturday morning happens in the parking lot, which is a bigger space. Okay, so that does sound like a dream. You know, a lot of people do sort of talk about soup kitchens and different kinds of programs, food programs as a Band-Aid on a broken leg. But what are we going to do about all of the broken legs? And I've often seen people either fall into the what would you call it? I guess you'd call it relief work, which is one way of talking about what we do, versus the sort of policy work, legislative work, that kind of advocacy, and then some people kind of go in that direction. And I think what I'm hearing from our conversation is that almost through these relationships, the way that our meals and other services lend themselves to relationship, people like you at St. James can kind of become go-betweens and brokers and mavens, you know, who are sort of knowing enough about the systems out there, the very disjointed and crazy systems that make up this patchwork of care in LA, and help people like the people that we've been talking about tonight and so many others actually make the connections that they need.
Yes, and maybe even that's what I was saying earlier. I don't know how to. I haven't settled on how to translate this into action, but I do feel like the knowing puts us in a place of obligation, that it's not enough to know and to feel badly about it. We have to figure this out.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah. So, you know, I know Lois really well. I'm so happy she's on the call tonight. Lois has gotten, well, I shouldn't
And
speak
you
for
know who
herself.
else is on the call? Someone named Kay Lee. Do you know who that is?
I don't know. I don't.
And also Linda Whitmore, who says, thank you both for this invigorating and inspiring exchange of ideas.
Yeah, Linda's a good friend too.
Yeah, I think she's one of your choir buddies, maybe.
She is. And Lois is too. Lois was in the choir.
Lois is too.
Lois and Linda and we all went to Westminster Abbey the first time the choir went. Oh my gosh. We're veterans.
See, and so because you have this relationship.
There you go. You see?
Yeah, I mean, this is the whole, I mean, I know that you don't need to talk about it this way, and we don't need to talk about it this way, but this is what Jesus's life was really about. It was about friendships, relationships, and levering those friendships because he wanted justice for his friends. He couldn't stand to see the way that they suffered against the sort of unthinking and oppressive powers that be, and so in a certain way, I think it is a one relationship at a time process.
Yeah, and to embrace that and let it and to experience it in all its fulsomeness is really very moving and meaningful. And I feel like, I'm retired and I'm healthy and I have time to do this. But the other ingredient that, I can't, all my life, I feel like this is the work I've wanted to do. And I couldn't have done it without St. James. I feel like St. James has a certain kind of spirit that embraces this and that nurtures it. It's such a wonderful relief from being a bureaucrat, for one thing, and having to speak out of both sides of my mouth. Like, I have to speak for the organization I work for and for the people that I'm trying to take care of. This is all about knowing people and taking care of people. I think that's one of the things that, if I hadn't been in the choir, I hadn't been coming to church for decades. When it was time for me to get confirmed in the Episcopal Church, I told my parents I would rather go to the temple and become Jewish. And that didn't really work out either.
Mm-hmm.
But coming back to church was a good reminder of how reliable the message of kindness is in the church. Whatever else are the complications of church, that was a reliable message. I don't know any place else in the universe that I occupy where that message is so reliably spoken.
When you think about a place like St. James, though, your experience in the choir was one little church of relationships, if I'm using the term church loosely here. And Soup Kitchen is a church of loving kindness, and Saturday mornings are, and our groups that study scripture are, and all the different ways, the African Christian Fellowship, there are all these different ways that people gather and come to know each other and care about each other and watch each other's lives and think about how they can help each other. And to me, that's church. I didn't grow up in any church, so I don't have much of a beef with organized religion, because I only found out about it in adulthood. But I love, like you, I love the ways that people take care of each other at St. James.
Yeah.
One practical question from a choir member, Lucy Wegner, who wonders, do we hand out masks, and do we need masks?
We could always use masks. I just bought some today for showers tomorrow. So there are a good number of outreach workers who are combing the streets, meeting up with people, but they have masks. But when people, so yes, masks are great to have. I'm a convert. As Kate knows, I was very, very resistant to the masking, but I'm over it. And I think that helping people, it's one of the things that we've made these little teaching tools that we put in the bag sometimes that talk about how to safe distance and what that means and where they can get tested if they need to. So we try to be reinforcing safe distancing all the time. And when their masks come in and they're all bunched up and dirty and, yes, to be able to give them a clean mask would be fabulous.
Yeah, right. So we can't have too many of those.
Yeah.
Margaret, Comfort is saying thank you immensely to you and your team. She says, we are so appreciative of your services. And Lois says, justice, yes, that's why we do what we do.
Yeah.
And then Comfort says, I lost one of my most admired women of faith this week, and that's Ingrid Ralston. She's a parishioner at St. James. She may have been at St. James maybe longer than anyone else, maybe not. I think there were some people who were here as children, but certainly she was a pillar. And Comfort says, may her soul rest in perfect peace, wishing all of you a safe 4th of July. And Carl Edwards chimes in saying, knowing people and taking care of people, that's almost a more helpful way to phrase love one another. Yeah. So as we wrap up our conversation tonight, and I think anyone listening knows that we could talk for easily 3 or 4 more hours, but for tonight, what's a thought that you'd like to leave us with?
I think that as a person who's 72 years old and who thought that her own youth was turbulent and full of disruption, I think it's bigger now. I'm positive. that this landscape we occupy right now is as confusing and upsetting and disrupted as anything any of us have seen and ever will see again. And in that cracked open moment is the opportunity to make it right. And we yeah, if I don't have that thought, it's hard to get out of bed in the morning, and I believe it firmly. I believe it because of my Tuesday phone calls with all my friends from the Council of Elders. I believe it because of the company that we keep when we're at Showers and Soup Kitchen. I believe it because of Kate and Father John's leadership. And everybody whose names you've mentioned, Linda, Lois, the people I know, we'll figure it out. But but it's that that
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Margaret Ecker. You are such a blessing to all of us. Thank you.
takes one to know one.
And thank you all. I'm hoping that next week you'll join me. It looks like I'm going to have as my guest Royal Rogers. She's a parishioner in the 8 o'clock service, and she's recently made a PBS documentary about the famous African-American architect of Los Angeles, the Hollywood's architect, Paul Williams. And so I'm really hoping that she'll be with me. She just has to get PBS to say yes. And it'll be great to hear all about what she learned about him and his life and his challenges, and certainly his amazing contributions to the I think, gorgeousness of LA. So looking forward to that. Thank you again, Margaret, and have a great 4th of July, everyone. Bye.